Decades in the making and finally told. From Wound to Scar is the powerful debut book by Marcia Pires. Written to help others heal through her gripping testimony. Join us for the official launch on the 29th of June at 2 p.m. at the Holy Ground in Soweto. (2445-6 Amunk Drive, Zone 6, Diepkloof, Soweto. Be part of this remarkable celebration.
When we say we are women, we mean that we are brave, we are strong, we are capable, we are unique, we are woman to woman.
Good afternoon, South Africa, and good afternoon to everybody who's watching us all over the world. Today, I think you are surprised, you are amazed. What's going on? And today we have a surprise indeed for you. Mrs. Marcia, today she's not the host, she's a visitor because she has a lot of surprises for you, especially about the day that everybody's been waiting for, the 29th. So let us hear today from Mrs. Marcia.
Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for having me here so that I can join now the show as a guest for the first time. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to have you here with us. Today we are grilling Mrs. Marcia.
I don't think that's possible. She's made of steel.
I don't think that I'm prepared for that. Can I go back to my old format and say, good afternoon, South Africa here?
Actually, today will be a beautiful day, honestly speaking, because we are going to be asking questions from the horse's mouth of this beautiful book that everybody has been waiting for. Remember, you've been waiting for this from wound to scar. And I know that Mrs. Marcia is going to answer our questions today. Are you not excited, Nami?
I am beyond excited, especially about the grilling, but you know.
You're going to behave a bit, isn't it?
It's difficult.
Yes. And we have our visitor here. I would like you to introduce yourself to our viewers, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ntombi, and I'm excited to be here.
Good to have you here.
Thank
with
you
us.
so much.
And, of course, one of the people that are behind the scenes. Let her introduce herself.
I'd just like to start by saying I'm much more comfortable behind the seats than I am in front of the camera. But it's a privilege to be here because I've read most of the book and I'm about to finish it in the next few days, and it is amazing. So it's really a big privilege to be here.
Yeah, it is. And now, straight to the point, where we've been waiting, we are going to ask questions from you, Mrs. Marcia. My first question is that, Marcia, you have experienced rejection from a young age. That's the first question I wrote here. And later faced emotional, sexual abuse, and physical abuse. So, how did those early experiences shape your understanding on yourself and on your path in life?
It had completely disturbed and twisted my understanding of myself because I didn't know who I was. My perspective of myself was based on the experiences I have been through. So I had been through rejection. That made me to always be someone who would put an effort to please people because I didn't want to experience rejection anymore. When I suffered the sexual abuse by someone that was supposed to protect me, that made me to be very conscious of not being close to people and not trusting. I had huge trust issues. And then it was aggravated by the fact that the first person that I ended up trusting, that was my then boyfriend, which seemed to love and care, was the one who afterwards used my past experiences and escalated into a relationship that was very violent. And often he would throw at my face what happened to me. That I pretended to be a girl of family and I had been through so much. And of course, I had complexes of inferiority. I had insecurities. I had all sorts of things. So up until my 22, 23 years, every decision, every thought, the way I saw myself was always related to all the past experiences. So if you're going to ask me who I was, putting aside those experiences, I was not able to tell you who I was. I didn't have my own choices, preferred color, preferred place, preferred this. I didn't know because I was living in function of pleasing people, saying the right thing, not giving problems, and holding everything that I was going through to myself.
And you mentioned that you had trust issues. And I've noticed every time we speak to someone who's gone through what you went through, the first thing they will tell us is exactly what you said here, that trust issues. They always have these trust issues because you spoke to this person, you told them about yourself and everything. There the person comes and use things against you. So you end up having these trust issues. It's understandable. Yes.
And it was aggravated also by the fact that when after many years I spoke to my mother what happened, she said, I don't believe you. You're trying to get away with excuses. Then if someone who was supposed to at least believe in me would tell me I was lying, really I could not count on anyone. So that I would go through every problem, every situation alone.
And especially your own mother, you want her to trust you, isn't it?
I mean, that's a great betrayal right there. And how do you then learn to trust?
True.
When you're talking about this, there's something that, especially in Africa, curses. You know how people like to say, oh, this happened to me. I was sexually abused when I was little. And it feels like now my life is cursed because every relationship I go into has some level of abuse in it. Am I cursed? Am I destined for abuse, for violence? What would you say to us about that?
I would say it's not a curse, but that is something that commonly we learn in psychology, and it is applicable in life, that the person enters into a cycle of abuse. And why? Because people see you in the way that you present yourself. So without realizing, those who have been to any sort of trauma, rejection, bullying, depression, when they introduce themselves, many times not even with words, with their actions, with their posture, with their attitude, people can sense that the person is still dealing with something that happened in the past. So that person, especially women, they become vulnerable. And because she doesn't see herself, and I'm going to speak more about women because it's easier for us to relate, but it happens to men as well. She sees herself not good enough. She sees herself carrying a mark from the past. Carrying a mark of abuse, a mark of sexual abuse, or having been through a very traumatic divorce. So now when she introduces herself to someone, she sees herself small. She's not good enough. And people will read it, and people will end up taking advantage or even getting so frustrated and sick because it's hard to be close to someone who is so clinging, so weak, so vulnerable that the person, the partner, the boss, whoever is interacting with that person will start abusing again. So I don't see it as a curse, but it is undeniable that there is this cycle of abuse. And because the person sells herself in the way that she sees so small, people take advantage. So it's proven scientifically that someone who has been to any sort of violence, be it sexual, domestic, rejection, she will experience that in another 3 times in her lifetime. And it's not because it's her fate, but it's the way that she introduces herself, she behaves, And of course, people sense that she's not confident, sense that she is not sure, that she will do anything you want her to do because she needs to prove herself.
Yeah.
And people take advantage.
Yeah, I think it's good for us to talk about this because, like I said, especially in Africa, people believe that it's a curse. And it's not a curse. It's because of your behavior and your sense of self-worth that makes people then start taking advantage of you. Because when you are such a people pleaser, for me, it's so difficult because it's so incongruent that you have trust issues. And then after that, you go into a relationship where you give a little bit of yourself and then you get clingy because there is something that is missing inside you. So when people don't understand that that's what's going on, they relegate it to a curse. They say, I'm cursed. I mean, come on. What have I done wrong? It wasn't me. I didn't bring this on myself. I was abused. But now everybody else is abusing me. And it just really is that vicious cycle of abuse and a lack of self-worth, and then you self-deprecate, and then after that you get somebody who thinks you're so wonderful because you portray this wonderful strong woman, and then when they get closer and they realize how injured you actually are, then many times they take advantage, and then the cycle goes on and on.
They take advantage of your vulnerability.
Precisely.
And sometimes it's not only the fact that people want to take advantage, but in a relationship, in a romantic relationship, it makes very difficult to be with someone who is insecure, who is jealous, who is always saying, no, you have someone, and that the partner loses his temper, his patience, because he doesn't receive anything in return. We often say people take advantage, but sometimes it's not only that, they lose patience because the person is so insecure that anyone doesn't want to. Tell me honest, if you have to be close to someone who is strong, who is an outgoing, who a go-getter, let me put like this, who is someone who leads, and you have to be next to someone who doesn't have an opinion. Would you like to have that? Whatever you tell me, it's fine. Whom would you like to be close to?
Go get her.
I mean, you get to the point where you're like, come on, make a decision. This is too much for me. Decide, is it hot or cold for you?
Yes.
I'm not in your body. Say something. It's true.
Yeah.
So, Miss Marcia, I want to find out, we all know that people who have been abused, they go through a stigma. Sometimes you find that you get discriminated against. Some people who are even close to you, once they find out that you've been through abuse, they look at you weird, like maybe you called it upon yourself or it was your fault. Some people, they even prefer that you don't talk about it. Let's not go there. And you also mentioned that when your mother found out, she was not very supportive. I want to find out, how did you gather the strength to eventually come out in public to share your story? Like, how did you get that strength, and not considering that, maybe the people that know me, they will no longer look at me the same, even people that are very close to you?
I would not have done that up until the moment that I was not resolved with myself, with God, and with everyone else. Because having trust issues and always trying to please people, always trying to do the right thing, and always worried about what people will think, will say of me, I would not have exposed myself. But it was a long journey, which I speak about in the book. And I had to deal with myself from the point of view of blaming. Because up until then, I was blaming myself for the decisions that I made that put me in the situation of experiencing domestic violence for almost 7 years. So I had to forgive myself. Of course, I had to let go the heavy feelings that I had towards everyone else, including my mom. And then I also had to deal with God. Because deep down, you might not have the courage to say, but in the back of your mind, there is always that question mark. Why did God allow?
Yeah.
Where is God? There is a God out there. Why he did not protect me? So we do not think that God is not responsible or cannot be responsible for people's actions. So when I decided to go out and speak, as a matter of fact, it was not my decision. I didn't wake up one morning and say, oh, I'm going to talk about that. I was with Cris Cardoso, speaking about my testimony, because she was reading a book about this, and she said, I clearly see this person did not overcome.
Yes.
And I was talking to her. I was already a pastor's wife. I was talking to her, and I told her my testimony, and of course she was shocked, because she never heard it. But at the same time that she was shocked with the story, she could realize that I was okay, that it was not causing any pain anymore. And it was when she said, start speaking about that. Now you imagine someone who always took in mind what people will say, will think of me. And now she comes to me and say, why don't you use this to help women? And that was the starting point. But I was not going to be able to do it if I still had issues inside. I was able to do, and I do. And honestly, I'm not afraid if people will look at me in a different way or not, because that's my story. And that is how the power of God came upon my life. I was able to do it because I had resolved it inside. And I knew that by speaking, I would help those who are still suffering the pain, the scars, the stigma. Because one thing I can tell you, there is a stigma. People like to label. And you have to be prepared. So for me to come here and say, I don't have a problem with that. I spoke my story from when I was born up until after being married and when I had dealt with that. And I'm sorry to say, if people will look at me with a different eyes, it's their choice. But whatever they are going to speak about or judge, it will not affect me. It will not inflict pain.
I think it's also because you see the bigger picture, Miss Marcia. I think for a lot of people, they are very worried about the stigma and the community and what family members will say, because the place where they're coming from is different. Whereas with Miss Marcia, it's for the glory of God. Sharing your testimony is for the glory of God. So it's easier to say, I don't care about what my family members say, or I'm coming out with my story, because this is not about me. This is to bring glory to God. And I think for a lot of people, that's not always where they're coming from.
Yes.
It's something I want to know, Ms. Marcia. It's a bit off the topic.
Yes.
Because this picture, the first time I saw it, I even want to cry. Every time I look at it, it really touches me. Because it is such a beautiful, beautiful young girl, child. Like I get so emotional. And I want to know, at the time this photo was taken, was this before or after the sexual abuse?
It was before, but it was exactly the year when I started realizing that my family structure was very different from my school friends. Because I would see father coming to pick them up. They would talk about what they did over the weekend. They visit Granny. And I realized by then, at this young age, already first year in school, and here is the full photo of it, that my family was a bit different, and why my father would not be with me. Today, it's quite common when I speak about that, people get so surprised and say, but then what?
It's life.
It's life.
See, it's normalized.
I'm talking about 50-something years ago. It was not life.
Yeah, because it's normalized now.
Parents, they had a different structure. And it was when I realized I was different. And it was when the insecurities started to kick in. Because then I came to understand at this age that my grandparents, being already elderly, they were now taking care of me. because I didn't have a mother and a father home like the other kids. And it was the moment that in this point in time that I realized I could not bring them any trouble. I needed to be their pride. I needed to do everything that would make them happy, because at the end of the day, I was imposing on them to take care of me.
And you were aware of it at such a young age already.
6 years
Because
old.
that's what strikes me about this picture is you can see the sadness in your eyes. And I think that is something I really have to commend you on, because often people will say, oh, I've healed, I've moved on, but their eyes don't smile. But your eyes actually smile today as you're sitting here. They sparkle. You can see that there's been complete healing, which I think is amazing. But just looking at this little girl and it having happened even after this picture was taken is heartbreaking, because it's such a young, tender age.
Yeah. And it was a moment that from that moment on, I would hear my grandparents saying that they loved me, and really they loved me. They provided, they would do whatever they could to make me to feel welcomed and loved. But often they would say, you have to build your life. You cannot do the mistakes your mom did. She destroyed her life. Now, when you talk to a 6-year-old girl, she destroyed her life. What it means? I am the reason for that.
Take the blame.
So I started developing all those bad feelings about myself. The blame, not to cause any trouble, to be the perfect girl, to be a straight A in school. If I would be feeling pain, I would not tell. If I would be needing something, I will not tell, because I didn't want to cause them any disappointment. They had been already disappointed with my mother. And why? Because of me. That was a straight thinking of a 6-year-old girl.
And I believe our viewers would like to know as well, because the abuse, you faced it when you were still young. Then when you were growing, what were other challenging moments you were facing while trying to escape the pain?
From this realization that I have a different family structure, and carrying that burden, you cannot disappoint. You have to build a life different than your mother. You have to be someone that brings pride to your grandparents. Then I went through another experience, because by then my mother was staying with us. She had a career. She would have a very good salary. And then when I was around 9 years old, she decided to buy her apartment. And I was so excited, because I was seeing the furniture she was choosing, the apartment, and she moved. And I was left behind. And for me, it was hard to understand. I was sure I would go with her. I am her daughter.
After all.
And she didn't sit me down and say, listen, I'm not taking you. She moved, and she would come to visit us. And in my mind, I'm really a mistake, because my mom didn't even want to take me with her. I only understood her reasons sort of 18 years later, when then in a conversation she said, I could not take you because your grandparents were so attached to you, they could fall sick. But those were 18 years later, when I was already okay with all that happened. For me as a 9-year-old, I said, really, I'm a mistake. And now even my mom is leaving me here. I'm rejected. So I would go through the night and I would cry. But I would never tell her, I wanted to go with you. I would never oppose or contest the arrangement. It was not my place. It was not my right in my mind. And then all that pain and rejection of being left behind turned into hatred after the abuse. Because in my mind, if she would have taken me, I would not have been abused by my uncle, her brother. So now, instead of just feeling rejected, I had grudges. I had hatred because she left me there.
You know, when I read that part in the book, I wanted to cry.
So Nami, before you speak, before you talk, just a moment. We have an insert that we have prepared, and it's about our book, the book, From Wound to Scar. It had a tour. Two countries on the other side, that is Brazil and Portugal. Let's have a look.
Before the official launch in South Africa, Marcia Pires took her story across borders, bringing her message of hope and healing to audiences in Brazil and Portugal. The journey began in Brazil, where she met with readers in churches, support centers, and even correctional facilities. In each setting, there was one clear theme. People were ready to talk, to listen, and to heal. Rather than simply presenting a book, Marcia opened real conversations about abuse, restoration, and the courage it takes to face the past. She did not just visit venues, she entered spaces where her testimony could meet people in their reality. Whether it was women searching for answers, survivors sharing their own stories, or inmates finding new direction, the impact was unmistakable. In Portugal, it was no different. Intimate gatherings created the space for truth to be heard and embraced. The response? Deep, emotional, and personal. These highlights from the tour show that this book isn't just relevant locally, it's connecting with people around the world. Different countries, same impact. And now, as we prepare for the launch here at home in South Africa, we are excited to bring that same energy, that same truth to our audience. Our book launch will take place at Soweto Holy Ground, the home of Woman to Woman, a place where so many stories have begun to change lives. The journey has started, the message is clear, and this is only the beginning.
Right. The book was a success. The book launch was a success.
And that's what we're hoping for Africa.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's our home.
Definitely. We are going to show them who we are in Africa. Isn't
style.
it? Yeah. Now back to you, Nami.
Yeah, as I was saying, you're talking about the part where your mom left you with your grandparents. But how you describe it in the book brought me to tears because, my goodness, I could just close my eyes and see that little girl muffling her sobs in the middle of the night, not understanding why. Oh, it broke my heart because you can feel that raw emotion. When you're 7, 8, 9 years old, things don't make sense. You're not going to go, oh, maybe there's a reason why my mom's not taking me with her or why I have to be with my grandparents. You just know that mommy left me here. Because I was the mistake she made that made her disappoint her parents, my grandparents. And I was such a big mistake that now she has a way to take us from here, but she's leaving me the mistake behind. I mean, that was heartbreaking to see that. How was it? Like, I think you would be able to give us that raw emotion that you felt when you didn't even want them to hear you cry.
Because I was sleeping in the same room that my mom and I would sleep alone. So when it was time to sleep and I would think about my day the following day, my mom was not there. So I desired that I could be with her. And I could not talk to anyone. That was my sense, my feeling. I don't have the right to talk to anyone. I have to soldier on. So at night I would cry, but following morning I would put a brave face, and when I would see her, I would say, I'm happy for you. She would not know that I wanted to go with her, or the few weekends which I would join her in her apartment. I would say it's okay. And when she would say it's time to go back to grandparents, I said yes, because they're missing. She had no idea.
Yeah, what was going on inside of you.
No, because I thought I did not have the right. So there are many situations, small situations for a child. And I remember one, Namis will help me to remember if I put it in the book, but I don't think I did. I was about 7, 8 years old, thereabout, and we were watching TV and I started crying. And my grandmother told me what's going on. She was a very serious person. She was a migrant from Germany, running from war. So she was very serious. And I didn't have the courage to tell her that thinking about death, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, thereabout, thinking about that. Not that I wanted to commit suicide, but I was thinking about that, and I didn't know what was it all about. And I had that heavy feeling. I was afraid. And when she asked it, I said, no, because I'm not doing well in maths, and I have a test tomorrow. And I stood up and left, and no one came after me. No one came to see what was happening, actually.
In that moment, I believe you needed someone to come and ask, like, what is going on? Are you okay? And all that. And now, taking from what Nametsu asked you, I'm just wondering here, because I know you have a brother that you love so much. I know very well, he's like a son to you. So in that moment when you were going through all this pain, alone and all that, when your brother came into the picture, did you have that thing of wanting to protect him because you were never protected?
It was a very different circumstance. My mom was staying alone, and she started a relationship with a guy, and she fell pregnant. But my grandparents didn't know. She carried her pregnancy to full term.
Wow.
And they didn't know.
Oh my word.
And I knew it. And I had to conceal. So when it happened, when she was 8 months pregnant from my brother, she finds out that this man was married with 4 kids. So my mom said, go back to your wife. And she had my brother alone. And because of all the difficulties that came about, now she had to return to my grandparents' house with my brother. So for me, I was happy with my brother. I didn't sense that he was a mistake like I was, because my grandparents didn't say, but I sensed that she was afraid to tell them, because when she told them, my brother was already 10 days old. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And I went to take care of her in her flat, and I stepped in working in her place, because that would make me to be away from home, not vulnerable to abuse. So when she came back, I was happy, because now I would be protected also from my abuser.
Yeah.
Because while she was away, it was when I suffered sexual abuse for almost, say, about 1 year and 2 months. So the fact that she had to come back, it was for me a relief. And even though I had the hatred and all, but somehow I felt I had some protection from my abuser, who would stay in the same house.
Did he continue to stay in the same house?
Yes, because he was single, and he was the favorite son of the family. 2 degrees, very intelligent, everyone would please him. So how could I say what happened? So I had to again keep quiet.
You also mentioned that you didn't want to bring any trouble to your grandparents, and you didn't want them to worry about you. So you were doing everything, soldiering on all by yourself. But didn't you develop a sense of resentment and hatred or anger towards them and your parents for not protecting you? Because as much as you wouldn't tell them, but in your heart of hearts, you're like, you could have done better. Did you ever?
More towards my mom. My father didn't know. He would come and visit me once a week. We would go out. So I had in me that since I cannot embarrass my family before my father. And my father died without knowing. When we were about to publish the book, I had, of course, to tell my stepmother, and I have 2 other sisters, and I needed to prepare them. And when she heard all about that, she was so broken and shocked. And the first question she did was your father aware of this? Because she was so sad. If he was, why he didn't act? And I told her, no, he died without knowing. I did not feel that I could embarrass my grandparents and my mother before my father. So it was a no-go. And I grew up knowing I could not hope that my mother and my father would come together. Because from the very beginning, they had that arrangement. She wanted a child. He complied. It is our child, but I live my life and you live your life, and that's it. So I could not count on them. On my mother, I had that hatred. But also mixed with pity because she had to come back. With my grandparents, I had such a respect that I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't want to cause any trouble. And the reason why that manipulation that was used, I cannot say, because your grandfather's coming out of a heart attack. He spent 6 months in hospital with all the complications of a heart. He had all the things that one heart can have, including the pacemaker. And I'm talking about 50 years ago. So medicine was not so advanced as today. So he would say, you cannot tell them. Because you are going to cause him to have another heart attack.
And if you would die, you would of course,
it's on me.
Blame yourself.
It was not what he was doing. It was me who would cause that. So I would clearly see I could not go to my grandparents. And I would not resent them for not knowing. Maybe I would resent a bit because they were cold in the sense of, like, when I cried and I went away, no one came to check on me. But in my mind, they are old. They owed and they doing a favor. So it was more towards my mom. But I think what it was the highlight for me, no one was to blame if not myself. If I had to blame someone first, I would blame myself. I was a mistake. And I had to suffer because I was the mistake.
So you felt like you deserve what was happening to you.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Speaking about your mother, Miss Marcia, did you ever confront her later in your adult years?
It was a situation that, let me just jump a little bit from where we were. Then I started working in the corporate world, and I passed my matric. I started varsity at the age of 17 because, you know, I would project my value through my achievements. So I was a straight A. I passed at the age of 17. I signed my first contract with a multinational. My mother had to endorse it. And I engaged into a relationship with someone at my workplace. A relationship that in the beginning seemed to be beautiful, perfect. The guy was taking care of me. He was throwing the red carpet, but it turned very violent. And of course, now my mother wanted to say that I was doing the wrong choices, that I would hurt myself. And I was not ready to give any years to her. Sort of, you abandoned me. So I could not continue with that, staying in my grandparents' home. So I rented my own flat and I wanted to move out. And my mother said, no, you're not going to take your things. Imagine, I was an adult. I was already doing my second year at varsity or third year at varsity. I had already even changed workplace, new contracts, and that woman who abandoned me now wants to tell me what to do.
To call the shots.
And I got into a fight, and she became physical, and she hurt me. And my then boyfriend say, you have to make something. Let's go to the police station. And I went to the police station to open a case against my mother. And when the police said, okay, since it's a family matter, you are an adult, you have all the rights to take your things, you go back, and if she doesn't release your things, then we are coming. So I went back to the house, and in that moment that I was so angry, I told her what happened. And it was another heartbreaking for me because she said, no, I don't believe you're just trying to get away because of this situation. You're calling the police for me. It has never happened, not my brother.
Ooh.
From that moment on, we never more spoke about that. So afterwards, I made peace with everyone. I put my life back into track. I came to God. I forgave her. I forgave everyone. But we could speak about everything else, not this issue. Not this
So it was
issue.
shoved under the carpet.
Yes. And I didn't speak because I knew she would not have the emotional strength to speak about that. So deep down, I think she died knowing it was true, but I didn't want to, again, confront her and speak about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you find that someone who also went through abuse, when they meet their own child who's going through abuse, they don't know how to react. So they try to deny everything. Like, no, it never happened, because they wish it never happened, but it did happen. And then regarding the launch of the book that you've already done in other countries, here in South Africa, we know it's going to happen on the 29th of this month. And having interacted with other women, have you had any feedback of women who tell you maybe emotional stories of what also they went through their own abuse? And how has been your reaction towards that kind of feedback?
When I introduce the book, I normally say that, yes, it is my story. But I don't pretend to be the most difficult story, because being in Africa for this long, I have heard and I have dealt with such stories that my story is so little in comparison to them. And there are moments that you really get a question mark. What am I going to say? And how can I help? Because more than words alone, you need to do something to rescue that person from that abuse. But always my mind plays in the direction of what can I do? It's not difficult for me to help women and give ears and counseling to such stories. And if I would have to mention stories here that I dealt with, my story is very simple in comparison to that. They have been through so much more. I have cases of abuse that the child, it's from her own father. So it's hard to talk about that. It's hard. It's cases like someone from the family abused her. She got pregnant. She had a baby girl who grew up to be 10 years old, and the same person now also abused the girl. So, but never I felt like coming back my story. Because I have dealt with it. What I feel is, what can I do to help this person? Either to rebuild or to take action or to guide according to the law, or whom can we refer her case to because she needs help, her life is at risk. Not that I will see the story and somehow I will see myself in that story and it will bring me sad memories. No. It gives me the strength to look for what can I do right now to change her story.
And I think it becomes very frustrating to you when you can't even do anything about something to help that kind of person who comes to you to cry about their story. Then your hands are tied, because sometimes there are things that make our hands tight. So I think you become very frustrated because you really want
It's very difficult not to see something like my story, but not being able to take that person out of that abuse, of that life-risking situation, not finding ways to help young girls out of the predicament they are, because they are in Africa, it's a lot of life threats. So towards the family, towards the community, we have to tread very carefully. So my mind goes around, what can I do, rather than coming back to my story as if I would feel the pain. Actually, I don't. I feel the courage that I need to do something.
And that's where this book is so amazing for me, Miss Marcia, because you can't physically be everywhere to counsel people and guide people who have been through abuse. But through this book, you can reach so many more people. And what I really like about this is the fact that it's interactive. And that you can actually, you know, there's questions, and it forces you to dig deep. Because when I first started reading it, I thought, I never experienced sexual abuse. I didn't experience rejection. I wonder how I'll relate. Until that first question.
It's very relatable. So true.
And then I was like, wait a minute. Actually, this and this and that has happened to me. And it did have an effect on me, you know? So I think that's amazing, especially for people who have been abused, but even for those who think that they haven't experienced much hardship. It'll make you delve so much deeper. It's not just about reading the story and reading a book and then moving on with your life. It's actually interactive and it can help you heal.
Yes, and I think other people who don't know that they are facing emotional abuse, when they see these questions, they will realize, wait a minute, someone is gaslighting me, and that is emotional abuse, because it makes you feel like you are not really being abused. It's all in your head, but you are being abused. And when you read this book, you see that sexual abuse is not the only abuse out there.
It's just a matter to see how our kids are being bullied in school. And don't you think that what they've been through, comparisons and being put down, will affect their life in the long run? When I was invited to write a book, because it's again, I didn't wake up one morning and say, okay, I'm going to write a book about my story.
Inspiration.
Yes. I didn't decide to do it. I was told, do it for the sake of others. I didn't want the book to be only about my story. I didn't want my story to be the focus, because as I said, I've dealt with so many grievous stories. But I wanted somehow the book to be a tool, because what is the point for me to tell people my story and not help them out of their situation? So I could say that all the questions, the interactions that I live by the end of every chapter, it was my process of healing. That God was showing me what to do, my self-confrontation, my introspection, and that moment that I realized, why do I see myself like this? Why I behave in that way? Why my mind is trapped in that thought? I made of that journey towards healing those steps and questions to the point of the book. The aim of the book is to help others to heal in the same way, because not everyone will afford psychological treatment or will be able to confide in others about the situation. We'll find decent people around, a support system. So through the book, and as you said, I cannot be everywhere, but the book can go everywhere in many languages and help them.
Okay, so we have an insert that talks about GBV, something that is a scourge in South Africa. And, they're talking about something that is so prevalent, something that's so prevalent. But many people have normalized things that are horrendous because they happen so often. Let's watch this insert and then we'll come back and I will share something with you from the book.
Gender-based violence in South Africa is not just a social issue, it's a national emergency. For too many women, fear is a daily reality. Safety is never guaranteed, not at home, not in public, not anywhere. According to a recent study, over 33% of women aged 18 and older have experienced physical violence in their lifetime. That's over 7.3 million women, mothers, sisters, daughters, each with a story that statistics alone can't begin to explain. And in just 3 months, between July and September 2024, nearly 1,000 women were murdered and over 1,500 were nearly killed. Add to that the staggering number of rape cases, with an average of 129 rapes reported each day. And the picture becomes painfully clear. We are living through what President Cyril Ramaphosa has called a second pandemic. Even the United Nations has labeled South Africa as having some of the highest rates of violence against women and children in the world. These are not just numbers, they are lives, lives that matter. GBV is not a women's issue, it's a human issue. And unless we all stand up, in our homes, in our communities, and in our systems, this crisis will continue. It's time to go beyond awareness. It's time to act, because no woman should ever have to live in fear. Not in this country, not anywhere.
Okay, the statistics are horrendous, but that's the reality we're living in right now. And, you know, before we went to the insert, we were talking about just this whole scourge. How people go through these things, and you were saying how horrendous the stories you've had to deal with from other women who shared their life stories with you have been, and how you even feel like your story, which was tragic, is so minuscule in comparison. But you said something, Suzanne, that, you know, you didn't go through abuse and you thought, what's this book going to do for me? I want to read something for you in the book, because this book is not only for people who've been abused.
Yes.
Very true.
Well,
I know where you're going.
it is, but now you're going to be able to maybe find yourself in the different things that were mentioned here, so that you can understand that this actually relates to you. It's not only about people who are in domestic violence or people who are sexually abused, but there's so much abuse going on. And maybe you're just walking around having complexes that you don't understand where they come from. Absolutely. And maybe if you understood that this that probably happened to you is the reason you have become the person who doesn't have a smile in her eyes anymore. Yes. Let me give you a little bit of what the book says. Okay.
I know where she's going.
It says, people often have a mistaken idea of what abuse is. Most think there are only 2 forms, domestic violence and sexual abuse. But I can assure you that everyone, men and women alike, has experienced some form of abuse. Who hasn't been ridiculed in a classroom? Who hasn't heard words like stupid, incompetent, or useless? Who hasn't been compared to someone seemingly more capable? Who hasn't faced workplace bullying? Which woman hasn't been told that all women like being catcalled on the streets, and we live in Johannesburg? It's a thing. Which man hasn't been told, stop crying like a girl, be a man, not a coward? You know, here in South Africa, they have a thing. In Setswana, they say, "Monna ke nku ha a lle." You know?
What does that mean?
Loosely translated, a man is like a sheep. He does not cry. Which means that you have to bottle everything up, man up, because you're not going to look like a little girl, as if a little girl is a synonym for weak, which it isn't. So, anyway, I digress. So, if you're a normal person, you must have answered yes to at least one of these questions.
If you're a normal person.
If you're a...
Let us just put it into the test.
Yeah.
Did you?
Oh, yes.
Yes to any of these questions?
Yes, because...
Oh, yeah.
Went through bullying. Yes.
Suzanne?
Definitely. And I think one of the things that I wasn't expecting to hit as hard as it did was being ridiculed in a classroom. I was like, oof, yes. Major scars, actually, from that happening.
I know.
And I had a bit of ADD, you know, so in the classroom I wasn't quite paying attention. And
It was,
the level of ridicule, I mean, it's horrific actually. Yeah. And
That is emotional abuse.
For me, it happened when we had a modeling thing, and I was there for modeling only, not to sing. Then the person who was supposed to open the whole ceremony disappeared. And my teacher looked at me and said, Martin, you are going to sing. I wasn't prepared. I still remember even the song. It's from Bette Midler. I don't know if you remember. The famous song, From a
Rose.
Distance.
Oh, from
Yes.
a distance.
And I lost it on stage. The lyrics just disappeared. I fumbled. And
Ouch.
you know when you have you have boys that wanted you and you didn't want them, and then now it's their time to do this on you, and they
feasted on it, huh?
they feasted
Yeah.
on me. They feasted on me.
Ouch.
It was so bad. I didn't want to come out of the house that day. You
see?
I was locked in the house for 3 days. I didn't tell my aunt because I thought she's going to laugh at me as well. I didn't tell. The only person who knew was my cousin sister. And she was trying to, to make me feel good, but it wasn't just getting inside. It wasn't sinking. It was heartbreaking. And then I said, how is the world going to look at me? Because they were made. But by the way, on that day, it happens that my husband was there. We didn't know each other. Because it happened in this school. He was studying in that school. And I said to him, thank God you never saw me. He said, of course, I was drunk.
So that it was before.
Yeah, before the church. Yeah.
For both of you.
Yes, for both of us.
Exactly for experiences like that, people were not aware that those experiences frame their steps forward. Because until today, I try to make her to sing in public.
It's a problem.
It's a problem. And I have Nami as my witness to that. You see? Until
Miss
today.
Nami never had such an experience, so she will sing.
See? She doesn't have a problem. But this one is hard. The steps that I propose are the same. Because any kind of experience that you may have gone through, that it's not necessarily domestic violence or sexual abuse, they marked you in a way.
It's true.
And there are many who can't go on in certain areas because of that. So the process, this journey that I did from rejection to sexual abuse to domestic violence to insecurity to complexes and all that, is the same, because I'm not inviting the reader to think about only domestic abuse. But what is it that has stopped her life in a given moment, and she's being trapped in that moment up to now? That is the purpose of the book.
And having shared some of our own situations, how can you share with us a way or a method for us to regain, or people who have been through abuse to regain their self-confidence, for them to remember the people they were before the abuse happened? How does one get that mentality back while on the journey of recovery?
They will have to read the book. Because it is a process. But it's very important that the person is open to remember who she was before that event happened. Because whoever she was, let me say, I have a photo here that it's quite different, and we are only 1 year apart. When you see this young girl here, I don't know if they can cover this one here. I was starting in school. And you see that a year and a half later, you see a girl who has sadness in the eye.
That's true.
So I invite the readers to go back to what were the dreams of this girl, how she saw herself, what was in her mind when she was still happy. That person, 20 years later, 50 years later, it's still inside of her, whoever she was. But all the traumatic experiences she had been through made her to forget that young girl that bright woman and give room to someone who has been broken, mocked, and destroyed. So now she's living in function of the one who's broken, that nature that has been broken, and she needs to rescue that person that is still inside of her. That is the beginning of the process. The most difficult thing, before someone asks me, I'm going to volunteer my answer.
Now, about your turning point here, you mentioned that faith played a significant role in helping you rebuild your life. Could you please tell us more about that?
I believe all the professionals in the area, they have a great contribution. They can make things a bit better. But I never saw someone completely transformed. And I can say about that, and I respect those who disagree with me, but without God, I could not be where I am today. So this change was with faith, knowing God, not necessarily religion, the universal church, God. I was able to see myself now through the eyes of God. I always saw myself through the eyes of the situation, through the eyes of my grandparents, through the eyes of my mother, through the eyes of my fiancé, through the eyes of my abuser. And I didn't even see myself through my own eyes. Because remember, I lost my identity between 5 to 6 years old. So when I embraced faith in God, when I allowed him to, dig all that I was going through, and it was confrontational, I had to cry, I had to ask for strength, because it's not easy to visit something that has been hidden under 7 keys, and you don't want to go there because it is painful. So when I have done that process, I saw myself through the eyes of God. And that was the turning point. When I understood I didn't need to suffer anymore. When I understood I didn't need to prove my value to others and to myself, because God was giving me value. That was a change of mind. And one of the things that I thought I would have to carry forever, and many people, they think like this, it's impossible to get rid of the past.
They say.
Yes, the past is there. I cannot deny. Now it's written in pages.
It's in black and white now.
Black and white.
With photos.
Evidence.
But I don't carry the pain of the past anymore. And one of the things that I was terrified during all those first 20 years of my life was about my past, the stigma, that you believe you will never build something different. And it was through God, through his word, through his voice, that for me, it was the turning point passage of the Bible, Isaiah 46, when he told that the past was gone and that he would do something new. He would put waters in the desert. My life was a desert.
Exactly.
And I was always trying to prove myself, to find some value in my achievements. And when you hear that your past is gone and he's doing something new, that was the beginning of everything for me.
And what you're saying is really good, because I'm encouraged by the fact that you don't sugarcoat the whole Christianity thing. Because there's a part in the book, in the chapter on reactions, where you say the harsh reality is that not dealing with the situation is merely sweeping it under the rug. But you also say never feel ashamed or intimidated if you realize that you still have reactions stemming from the abuse. Do not let the fact that you attend church become a crutch that stops you from facing these reactions out of fear of being misunderstood or judged. It's important.
It is, because people think that once I started attending church, now I change my clock of someone with a secular life out there, and now I dress up as a holy person. So I need to behave holy before others. I cannot have those down moments because I'm a Christian. In the whole Bible, if you look at the Bible with the eyes of God, It was written for us when we were in down moments. Jesus said, I didn't come for those who are
Well,
I came for the sick.
yes.
But I don't know what happens when people dress up religiosity.
Yeah.
They want to be perfect and having their lives destroyed. So they put up a smile, they behave in a different way, but they still go back, they cry, they think about suicide, and they don't deal with this fact.
Yeah.
So I had reactions in me that I didn't know of. And I never pinpoint why I have such a reaction to my past. But for instance, I didn't like noise. I didn't like the noise of telephone. And I never realized why until God brought about. And I remember that when I was trying to distance from my abuser, from domestic violence, under death threats, he would call my direct line 16 times a day, threatening me. And how I associated that. Yes, I was out of the danger now, but I still didn't like telephone ringing.
So you had a root. You discovered that there was a root behind that.
And I was already a Christian. And I have to say, okay, I have a telephone here that will ring.
Trigger
It's not with a death threat because that is gone. I had to reset my mind.
Yes.
But I had that root. And I had other little somethings. My husband in the last chapter,
Yes, I saw.
he was invited to write a surprise to me. He speaks about something that I didn't remember that happened, but it was so clear to him that I would be dealing, I was still dealing with this kind of rude movements and noise and violence that he saw in me that I was very scared. And he changed his way. But he made me aware of my reaction. And because now I was okay, I questioned myself, I don't need to have that reaction anymore.
Yes.
And we dealt in groups here in the church with women that when they were attacked from the back. They didn't see the perpetrator coming. So imagine someone walking in the streets of Johannesburg that are very crowded. Whenever she would sense someone, men, women, children, was just walking behind her, she would literally stop and go against the wall in the middle of Johannesburg.
Imagine.
Because she had that fear. Someone is coming to attack me again. So those are the things that once you become a Christian and your life has been changed, having the Holy Spirit, God brings to you and show to you, and you question, I don't need to be worried about the phone ringing. No one will threaten me again. So you are able to process your mind and that route goes. However, if you haven't dealt with it, if you are still a slave of that, it's not only a matter to say, I don't need to fear. That panic, that anxiety, that fear will be present in your life.
You mentioned, sorry.
No worries.
You mentioned about how when you were crying, you wished someone could have followed you to find out what happened. I want you to please kindly assist us with helping our own family members. Maybe there's someone who's been through abuse and we are just indifferent. We don't know how to help that person. How can we better understand and even help someone in our own families? I know the book can help, but what can we just do immediately for the person to be in a space where they are willing to open up so that they can help?
First thing you need to do is to tell the person you are there for her. And you are not going to judge. You are not going to limit whatever she feels like to say. You are not going to blame her. Women are so afraid of labels. Because not knowing how to deal with a situation, you need to find a scapegoat. So you have a young daughter who came home and she was raped. The mother, not knowing how to deal with that, will say, but why were you walking in that place at night?
Why were you wearing such skimpy clothes?
I told you not to hang around with those guys.
Yeah.
So victims, they close themselves because they're very afraid of the judgment. And I can say that sometimes the judgment is more hurtful than the action itself.
That's true.
So once you approach the person and say, you tell me up to the point you feel like, and if you don't want to tell me anything, just let me hug you and know that I am here for you. And whatever happened, I'm not judging you. Then you create a bond. The person might not talk to you in that very same moment because she needs to test the waters. She's afraid of judgment. But knowing that you are truthful to your word, that she will start talking, and you are there to listen to her, you are giving her an opportunity. And when she doesn't want to say more, that is her limit. Respect.
Yeah. And Marcia, can you please tell us and our viewers how important forgiveness is for oneself and for the others? Because I know you spoke about it a lot here because I've read. Last night I didn't sleep because of this book.
Sorry?
Yes, but I think for me that is very important. It's part of the healing process.
It is.
Yes.
And I wanted to explore a bit because out there people think that once we talk about forgiveness, we are, in other words, preaching impunity. So people can do whatever they want and you just forgive.
Just forgive.
No, I'm not here defending impunity. I advocate for the law. And whenever we have a case, they know I'm going to ask social workers, I'm going to see what the law says, whom can we contact? But the person who suffered the aggression and whatever situation we described here, without realizing, your mind is in the perpetrator day and night. You wake up thinking about what happened. You go to sleep thinking about what happened. The more you want to forget, without realizing you are making him the center of your life. So when you have an opportunity, the first thing that comes to your mind, look what happened to you. If it was not because of him, you now could go ahead. Look what happened with you. If it was not because of the action of your mother who left you, now you would have a different life. So the more you want to forget about that person is in your mind. And worse, that person is deciding for you because you don't take chances. You don't believe in yourself on account of what he, she, they did.
So in other words, you mean that if you resist forgiveness, you are a slave of that person.
Yes. And I'm not speaking that just by assumption. Be honest. Those who needed to go through forgiveness, be honest to say, yes, that person was in my mind day and night. I could not sleep without remembering that my husband betrayed me with that woman. What does she have that I don't have? And I took care of him. I did so much. So that person is the center of your mind. When you decide, and you're not going to feel, I'm going to forgive. No. The thought will be there. When you decide that you're letting it go, you are allowing yourself to replace that center of your life by something else, by new plans. So actually, the act of forgiving is not for the sake of the person. It's for you to have peace. Because while you don't forgive, that person will be in your mind day and night. Every decision, every thought, every word, every feeling, you're going to say, I'm living like this because of what happened.
In other words, if you do not forgive, you are hurting yourself. It's like taking rat poison and drinking it, trying to kill the rat that is in your house. Then you drink it and kill yourself. That's the thing when you do not
and when
learn
you
how
don't
to
forgive, you leave that situation
over and over again. Yes.
So if you were betrayed, you're going to make yourself to be betrayed every day, 3 times a day, 4 times a day. When you see him, when you see her, So you need to have that peace. And that peace only comes when you let go.
Yes.
And it's not impunity. Let the law takes its course. Let the authorities do whatever is necessary. We are not preaching here, no, do not seek for the law, for justice. That goes against the word of God. But allow yourself to live again.
Yes. Yes.
Something interesting, Miss Marcia, in you with your story specifically is the fact that instead of becoming rebellious, you turned to overachieving.
Yeah.
But so now as an adult, because that's a good thing, right? Our society tells us overachieving is great. And this is so good and you must have a spirit of excellence. And but in a way, that was your coping mechanism and your escape.
Exactly.
Did you have to let go of that?
Yes, because when you do it to project your value, you conquer this much, but you're never satisfied. You still don't see your value. So, for instance, if it was in old days, oh, here's the book. Very nice. Inside of me, and if people don't like, if I have bad criticism, if they say I'm lying, so you don't enjoy life. So I had to let it go of overachieving. I am still a go-getter. They know. When I decide, let us do it, I will do it. But I don't project my value in that anymore. And if maybe I don't achieve, it's not the end of the world for me. And with whatever comes to happen, I am in peace. Those who project their value in overachieving and in conquests and in whatever that can be tangible, though they have it, they never satisfied. They always looking for the next move. They always planning what is next. It's like any abuse to chemicals. You need to increase the dose. And that is the same with achievements. You always need more. And the more you conquer, you think it's not enough. You don't see your value. You have to have more. So you have to let go.
And it's very good that Suzanne brought that question, because sometimes we see people outside, even amongst our family members, doing so much, but so much. And you wonder, this person does not get tired and all that, and only to find out that they are covering up for something, or there is a void that they are trying to fill in, and they try this goes, they are not satisfied. Another time, as you said, they are not satisfied. Everything does not satisfy them. They are always empty. So it's very important, because maybe we have viewers, they don't even know themselves that
they are overcompensating for the emptiness that's there.
And it also makes it so hard to detect the abuse, because when I read about your overachieving, I immediately thought, oh, my daughter, she's a straight A student. But I mean, in this case, we have a very open relationship, and the situation is totally different. But I think an important lesson in your story, Ms. Marcia, is the fact that just because your child is achieving doesn't mean they're okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that everything is okay.
Yes. They may be compensating for something.
Yeah, that's true.
They may be. We are not saying all of them. No, please don't look for the yes.
Yes.
Maybe.
Maybe
she's someone who loves to study.
Yes.
That could be. But you observe that those signs don't come alone. There are always another sign that follows with, that prompts a question, is she fine?
Yeah.
For instance, as a mother, you saw your daughter just standing up crying. You would go after her.
Yeah, I think we are coming to the end of our podcast.
It was not that hard.
Yes, it was not that hard, honestly, it wasn't. But before we close it, we are going to close it with last question for our viewers. With so much stigmatization in the society, what would you say to the society, with so much stigmatization, because they stigmatize abuse. So that's why people don't want to talk about it. So what would you say to the society? Because they need to learn how to deal with people that are abused. Maybe at the moment there is someone struggling with abuse in the society and they've been stigmatizing that person. So what can you say to them?
Stop labeling.
Yes.
And respect the victim. Work more on awareness rather than trying to find the scapegoat. Because you may think that if you find someone to blame for that, your share is excused. Our share is never excused. There is something we have to do. We need to bring awareness. We need to create open spaces. We need to be there for victims. But why we keep looking for the scapegoat, the one to blame for that? Or why have you been in this place? Why you did that? Why you insist in that relationship? We're just shutting the victim out. And we're taking the seat of judgment. Victims don't need to be judged. They needed to be respected and helped on the way to become just survivors. I am a survivor today. I don't feel myself as a victim. And now as a survivor, I am empowering others to survive, to overcome and to be healed.
You heard it from the horse's mouth. So do what you are advised to do so that we can help our society, because it's very, very important. Because as she said in the beginning, that when we stigmatize, we hurt people more than what they went through. So we have to be careful in doing that. We cannot stigmatize, because anyone can go through abuse. Doesn't matter, emotional, physically, or sexually. There are many people who are going through that. Let us be kind to one another. And we would like Mrs. Marcia to invite people for her book.
Yeah.
Please, you do it.
29th of
In 2 days. We chose Soweto because Soweto has been the home to woman, women in action, and all the projects that we do, empowering women. So that's why we're going to launch the book this coming Sunday, 2 p.m. in Soweto, in a celebration. Celebration not disregarding those who are suffering, but with the assurance that as I overcame, you can overcome as well. So you are our guest. If you have never been through any sort of abuse, thanks God. But surely there is someone close to you, and maybe you don't even know who she is, you're going to be empowered so that you become a voice. Become a voice for someone who doesn't have the courage to speak about what she has been through.
Yeah, we have come to the end of our podcast, and see you in the grounds on the 29th for the book launch. Remember, don't forget.
Your copy.
Have your
Then
copy.
until next week.
Yes.
Back with...
Of course, back to normal. Back to normal.
Yeah.
Yes, we are done.
So, Ms. Marcia, would you say that a lack of education could be a contributing factor for people stigmatizing people who have been abused, because they don't understand what happened? So they end up mistreating people who are trying to come out and say, this is what happened to me.
Lack of awareness.
Lack of awareness.
Yes.
When you don't know how to deal with a situation, you look for a way. Like my mom. I don't think she didn't believe.
Yeah.
But think about what would be necessary from that moment that she was made aware. She would have to act. She would have to confront family. She would have to go against. She would have to prove. And she was not prepared for that. So she denied.
Yes.
So when you don't know how to deal with that situation, you will find a way. That problem fell on your lap. Oh, let me push to someone else. It's your fault because I don't know how to help you. Making people aware, that's not the end of the road. That's not the end of the family. That is not the end of the community. Because in South Africa and Africa, this is what is played. If you speak, our family is destroyed. If you speak, the community will know. Those things don't matter. What matters is be there for the victims. Because denying or not will not change the fact that it happened. And people try to deny. It's like It takes my responsibility away.
So true. And sometimes speaking out and addressing the issue with the family can also help the perpetrator, because maybe he might be having some situations.
Maybe he was abused himself.
So that's how he shows, he acts out and ending up hurting more. As Mrs. Nami said, it's a vicious cycle.
Yes,
It keeps on going on, and more people are getting affected negatively.
It has been proven that violent men, it's so confusing, but it's proved scientifically. In the book, I give the stats and all of that. Violent men, they saw, for instance, their mother being abused by the father. So he understood that protection is by means of force. As she was someone dear to him, the mother, and she accepted. So in his mind, without realization, that's the way to go. So he will be violent as well. Or she will be violent because she grew up in a violent environment. So protection, love, is demonstrated by means of force. So now how we judge them. The abuser is a victim. There are disturbances in him. So he also needs to be helped. He also needs to be somehow supported to find means to change.
Yes.
Not just as many women think, no, I have to be quiet, I have to accept. It will escalate.
Now we are ending the podcast for real.
That's
For real.